Hey guys, how's it going?
Uh-oh. You guys hear me good? Is there echo?
No, you're good. Yeah, sorry about that. I had trouble joining from my phone.
That's cool. All right.
Have I missed anything good?
Nope, we're starting right now.
We're waiting on you. Now we're ready.
All right. I'm just going to start so that we can keep this thing going. Organic project co-opensation. The motivation for this is we have a way of distributing things fairly, whether it be keep what you kill or some type of advanced point system for services, but we've always been debating about how you would do it for projects and products. So I went ahead and took everything that I knew about point systems and applied it to products. And so that's where this paper comes from. Some of it will be review if you are familiar with some of the aspects of fair division, and it might be new to some of you. Okay, so um, but just to start out with some of the issues, right? So I'm going to read some of this. Organic projects are those projects which begin with no funding and are the outcome of multiple people with diverse skill sets, combining sweat, equity, know-how, and other resources to create a product. So there are a number of issues that arise when developers and other roles try to build a team. Some of those issues are how does an organically developed team deal with unfair payouts of revenue? How does the team motivate people with diverse roles such as design, project managers, um, product managers, and marketing if there's no upfront capital? And how does the team address the fear of empty promises? That is the fear of receiving no reward or recognition while contributing to an organically formed project. These are all things that uh, it's some of the motivation for me for trying to create a cooperative with you all in the first place. Um, because it always ends up where you work with people and you're trying to wrestle with how you divvy up what it is that you created. And so this is an attempt to do that for products. And as always, I'm always trying to apply game theory. Some of you, I mean, that are familiar with the rest of the things that we've written about this topic, you're familiar with fair division, but I'm going to review some of that. So the study of fairness is called the study of fair division within game theory, and there's really 5 components of fairness that need to be addressed when making a fair system. A fair system is a system that distributes resources fairly, and some examples of a resource are customer, revenue stream, code, machinery, or any tangible asset that has the potential to create revenue. We had one talk that was about just resources and resource distribution, and we talked about that extensively. And it's a complicated subject, but when you do it wrong, it creates an environment where people are they have disincentives. So it's important to make sure that you do that correctly. Otherwise, people just won't contribute. That's one of the main issues with trying to create some type of incentive system or compensation system. So when you're talking about fairness, and this is a review, the 5 components of fairness are proportionality, envy-freeness, equitability, non-manipulability, and efficiency. And we're going to talk a lot about that stuff later. And I'm trying to apply those things. Um, every people have different concerns when they're talking about fairness. If you want to treat fairness seriously, um, then you're going to have to address those components. You might be affected by one of those components more than the next person. So it's important, if you want to address what's fair and if you care about what other people care about within your group, you want to understand what they think is fair and be able to address it. So if you take it seriously, then you can kind of avoid some of the issues. I've found with fairness, when you the first step is to try to take it seriously, and then you can get around some of the other issues. Um, so when we're talking about projects or products, um, you need to try to make it to where you plan the incentives. The components for incentive planning are resource creation, innovation, and avoiding play markets. Play markets is something that we've talked about 2 or 3 times before, and it's always going to come up. It's one of the things that it's a counterintuitive truth. Um, People usually underestimate the effect of what's called playing market. I'm going to talk a little bit about that just as a review. So as far as resource creation, at a high level, a bunch of people can get together and create a resource, and a resource is something that's just a valuable asset. It can be money, it can be a machine, like I said earlier, it can be a tool that you use to create other resources or assets and things like that. What you want to do is make it to where you incentivize, when you have a group, you want to incentivize creating resources. Uh, when you don't have or the incentives to create resources within the group, people tend to do short-term thinking, and they don't combine to like create a coalition to try to make resources. So it's something to keep in mind. So when we're talking about code, because there's some interesting aspects about code that make things complicated to reason about. Um, Code can have the attribute of being non-excludable, right? So a non-excludable resource is a kind of resource where you can't prevent other people from um, consuming it. So open source is an example of that. Um, you can't really stop someone, let's say Wikipedia. Wikipedia is based on an open source project called MediaWiki, and Wikipedia cannot stop you from making your own Wikipedia. You can install Wikipedia. If you're a great DevOps guy, you can make all the performance enhancements and everything and compete with Wikipedia if you want to. They don't exclude, they develop the software, but they don't exclude you from using it. That's a non-excludable resource. And that's something that we have to wrestle with within software and how we deal with that. And then a non-rival resource is a resource that can be shared or duplicated without loss of value. An example of a non-rival resource could be, let's say, the code for a fax machine, which increases in value instead of loses value the more it's duplicated. So that's a counterintuitive truth as well. If you're talking with someone within political science or economics, they tend to be on the side of scarcity. And if you make something, you got to keep everyone else away from it. That's fine. And that's kind of the normal way of thinking things. But within software, within our organic projects that we work on, we're trying to build things up from the bottom. If you do a scarcity mindset, you're leaving a lot on the table, and that's going to violate one of our rules with fairness with efficiency. So you have to keep those things in mind. Non-rival resources are things, especially within a cooperative, that you want to try to promote if you have the ability to do that. So, so those are some resources. I'm going to give an example of the creation of a resource so that we can have a some type of focal point. This comes from an example of Otacon, the spaghetti, what's called within the um, organizational economics research. There's an example called the Otacon, a real example called the Otacon Corporation, that tried an experiment where they said, hey, let's go ahead and let everybody, they're a hearing aid company, and they were losing market share. Other people were doing better than them. And they said, okay, we need to innovate how we're going to do that. And what they did was they allowed everybody to have a great amount of autonomy. They owned their projects. They went ahead and developed new hearing aid devices. They also were allowed to um, invest in the company more than you would in a normal setting. And so, this is a kind of a caricature of what they were doing within that environment. So engineers at a company combine their sweat equity and know-how to see what they can create. So that's the first step. And this is an example of resource creation. The engineers produce a new hearing aid design. Okay. And then some new machinery is created by the engineers to implement the new hearing aid design. It's not exactly what happened at Otacon. They are allowed to invest in the company um, in a unique way. And supposedly they could have applied that to what they wanted to. And then new customers are required to purchase the new hearing aids. So resources within this example are the new hearing aid design, the machinery that the engineers created. Maybe they're very efficient at creating this new hearing aid or whatever. And then customers. All three of those are resources. And these are important things to reason about. They're three different kinds of resources. All right, so let's see here. You've got two kinds of aspects of incentives when it comes. So that's resources. When we're talking about incentives, there's you have to have a good understanding of resources and the creation of resources, and then you want to try to understand incentives and how they work. So you've got this, if you have a group of people, you can have a higher level, which is the umbrella, and there are all these incentives from the perspective of the umbrella. And then there's incentives from the perspective of the individual. The umbrella wants to have non-trivial contributions, obviously given by its members. You want your members to take various risks, which could be the risk of their time investment. They could even invest money, those types of things. But you want them to use their autonomy to create resources and innovate, and then either contribute that or use that in the name of the umbrella organization. So the reason why you want to do that as an organization is what's called the innovator's dilemma. We talk about that a bunch in our other sessions, but basically the innovator's dilemma is good management gives the customers what they ask for. The customers always ask for whatever they already have, better, faster. Disruptive technology and innovations are not what the customer wants. An example could be, I would say, Steve Jobs. He says, "Hey, guess what? I'm not letting you take the battery out your phone." And customers say, "I want to replace the battery in my phone." He says, "No, I'm not going to let you do it." And that's an example of management saying no to a customer. And there's a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. If you're more interested in that, you can take a look at that. But autonomy and small groups are really good at creating disruptive technology. And by the way, the innovator's dilemma of the book is what kind of coined the term disruptive technology. They and It's hard for large organizations to do that. We're concerned with that as far as organic product compensation and all that stuff like that, because we want to. That's one of the benefits, right? So there's an opportunity cost when you don't come together, you don't have your autonomy and all this other stuff, and it hurts the umbrella organization. So they want to. It's one of the incentives for the umbrella. So as far as individual incentives, we talked about this in some of our other sessions. We've got the autonomy, which is after you've got a couple different things that individuals are concerned with. One of them is pay, but in the book Drive, autonomy and mastery and purpose are three other components that motivate individuals. And what you want to do is have an incentive system that allows for more of those, right? And so that's something that we need to do when we're creating a system. And then what is also important is enforceable property rights. So individuals, and one of the issues that I mentioned before, individuals are concerned about oftentimes contributing and then not receiving any type of reward or recognition for what they've done. And so if you have a system that creates some type of property rights, some type of bindable contract or something that they can go back to and say, yes, I contributed and I should be rewarded based off of my contribution, then they're going to be more incentivized, right? So now we get to play and market, and play and market is essentially when individuals create a resource and then some higher up repurposes that resource. The market is supposed to be this autonomous place, again, where disruption happens, you create new products, all this type of thing. But when you play market, you create the idea that it's a real market, but it's not actually a real market. And what happens is people swoop in and take whatever it is that was created and harvest it for themselves. And this happens over and over again, and you have all types of, and it happens in so many different ways. We have lots of papers talking about that. So if you want to see some of that, harvestocracy is one that goes over that. So we want to avoid play market in our incentive system for projects and all this stuff like that. So now, what type of fairness system? First, let me stop. You guys have any questions so far? Over any of the issues? Do you guys have issues that you've seen within projects? And like I said, organic projects are ones that don't have money in the beginning. So you're starting off, people aren't getting paid, it might be an open source project, whatever, and you're trying to come together to work on a thing. Programmers come together and do it, and it's not that big of a deal. You kind of think, okay, everyone's going to be on the up and up later. But some of the other roles, designers, product managers, sales, marketing people, all these people, they keep you at arm's length when you're creating a new thing. They're not going to, historically, they don't contribute as much.
I guess, so that what you're talking about right now brings up other items, but what I was thinking about was regarding the innovator's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
And it's talking about creating an environment where you can have the autonomy. So if we're just doing a project that everybody's passionate about and having fun and they want to do it, then you bring them in and you're good to go. if you're talking about something where you're doing that and you also want people to come up with a product that's sellable, and at some point you're going to pick a market. And then, so how are you balancing it? Or do you talk about that, like balancing what customers would want versus disruptive technology? Dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of the things that is a weakness of open source model of scratch your own itch. You scratch your own itch, well, okay, so your customer is somebody like you, but a lot of software, I'd say most software, is not used by someone like you as a developer, right? It's somebody else. And guess what? There's people who specialize in that, product managers and marketing people and all that stuff. So your incentive system needs to try to address incentivizing those people early, right? Instead of later on, right? Because you're going to be working on something as a developer and saying, okay, I'm scratching my own itch, but if that's not the thing, it could be that it starts out as your own itch, but it could be even, 70% of it is actually something that's marketable to people who have plenty of desires that you're not familiar with and all this stuff like that. Managing priorities and all these types of things are all kind of, we tend to think as developers, we tend to think, oh yeah, I can do all that, don't worry about that. But there are more efficient ways to do those types of things. So it's important to incentivize that stuff, I think.
So how do you then, if if we then presume that, okay, we do want to incentivize the help to try to prioritize so that you have some people that are focusing on end users beyond yourself. And then you also want to make sure that people are motivated to do something disruptive versus just building another version of what everyone else is used to. So how do you balance that in this scenario where we're talking about, if there's no capital or whatever. So if we have capital, it may be different because we say, here's what they want. And we know we need to meet these and we're going to add these features. Versus with this, how much, and there may be more a specific amount of management. So if you already have capital and you're building products, or a brand new one or something that you already have, you probably know how much time you need in those non-development roles or whatever you want to say. If it's brand new, then how much do you need for something like this? Or
yeah, so we talked a little bit about, or we have a whole session on organic structures. And one of the things that we said was you have a network, and you have a close network, there's strong ties. You don't really get to pick and choose. You have a set of people that are close to you. If it's all programmers, guess what? You're scratching your own itch. You don't have Jack Welch on your team. So you don't get to say, I'm going to make airplane engines or software, and sell it or whatever. He could just wave the wand and you'd be good to go. But you don't get that. So one of the defining things is who you have close to you, right? When you're creating this organic team. And then given that, then you're limited in saying, okay, who I can incentivize. But what you want to do is have the tools to incentivize. So if you have walk on water project manager, walk on water product manager, salesperson, whatever, it could be that you're someone that isn't really even a good dev, but you've got like Jack Welch, right? So it's kind of, oh well, I want to incentivize him, right? And then I have my incentives, but I need something that will allow for that. And so really how you start is limited, right? You can't say, um, I'm going to start with this group of people organically and then, and then create like a mythical figure and a mythical role that you don't have.
So the umbrella organization needs to be, you have the structure and you need to be flexible on what roles and skills and stuff
Yeah.
are required. So you can always incentivize.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that ties back to your first 5 on fairness and efficiency. So if you don't have one, then you need to distribute potentially to other people. So you may end up more on devs if it was, you say you don't have any salesperson, but it's devs and maybe a PM or not.
Yeah.
Or you have a project manager,
Mm-hmm.
a junior dev that knew the salesperson and whoever,
Mm-hmm.
and you optimize there. Okay.
What I think is important and what has happened in the past, what I've observed is you'll have someone that is great at some domain and then you don't have the incentive system for it. So you can have a designer and they're just like, no, I'm not going to contribute because I have no way of, I don't have any property rights in what you're building. So, that type of thing. Project managers and product managers and all those types of things, they don't have any incentive to really dig in and give you 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week or whatever. They're not going to do it. And that's what's happening is they're excluded with the system that's normally happening.
Yeah.
So essentially the system that we work with right now within open source and development, organic open source and development, excludes all types of roles. And that's the part where a big part of what I think needs to be addressed.
It probably would exclude developers too, with regards to what I've seen a lot of, I guess, startups or even pre-startup. You look at somewhere like um, a place where you can walk in and you have people with ideas, and they're looking for a developer, and the system that they use is essentially, we're going to give you some stocks or whatever without knowing. So I think it's valid across the board. The other direction.
It's pre-investors.
Yeah, pre-investors, and you have someone with an idea and they go out and they may have a network to sell, but they don't have the capability to develop and they don't have the capital to pay. So they come in and go, we're going to give you part of this. And a lot of people that I've met in the industry that are focused on getting the work done, and that could be project managers, designers, often developers. They don't understand like different types of stock and other items like that. So this is kind of precursor to that, the discussion of fairness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying, I think it's valid even the other way, not just the roles that are excluded, like you're saying, but any of them.
Yeah, I'm pretty hostile to the way that the traditional incentive systems are set up with the stocks. Basically, that setup is idea guy, smart guy on top, and everybody else does what they say.
Right.
The good part about it is, okay, well, if you have money, it's essentially not an incentive system other than regular payment, right? So you might as well just have it's all the weaknesses of not having a secure long-term W-2 position, right? Because the whole software project might die in a year or whatever, right? So you don't have any of that security, any of that stuff, right? But you have a compensation system of that. You don't have the long-term compensation because so you take on the risks of a short-term project.
Yeah.
You're acting like as if it's a long-term W-2. So it's kind of an okie doke. That's how I look at it. I don't like
it's a trick.
Yeah, it's a trick. And then there's plenty of games to play You have, I probably mentioned it before, you've got the common stock game where, okay, I've got all this common stock, and all right, we're going to go ahead and do this. When they sell, exit, whatever, then I'll get paid. It's like there's all types of games. The preferred stock people can take all the money, do tricks like sell the chair for $1,000 or something like that, and then make the common stock not really make that much money. There's all types of things that they can do where you thought that you were an owner because you had stock and you kind of have a general idea that stock is ownership, right? It's like actually there's a different class and they manipulate you basically. So I don't like that. I don't like that that's legal, but whatever. Let's move forward here at some of, I guess, the meat and potatoes of this thing. We got fair division. Most people, when they think of fair division, they think of egalitarianism, which is everybody's treated equal. Fair division and the study of fair division does not say that. Like I said, it has the different components. Proportionality is when everybody thinks that they received one end of the resource, right? Or when an individual thinks that they received one end of the resource, right? So if there was a cake split 3 ways and you received 1/3 of the cake, you believe that it was a proportionate distribution. You don't care about what other people got. You just care about what you got, right? And then there's envy freeness, which is, oh, what did everyone else get? Oh, they got more than one end, then it's not envy freeness. That's another way to think about, or another component. When you're talking about fairness, some people are concerned about envy freeness. And so if you want to reason about it, that's the concept to use. And then you've got equitability, which is an important one that we always point out. Equitability is when a member believes that every member has received an equal division according to their own valuation. So if a member received a smaller distribution but did less work, and the smaller distribution is valued by that member the same as the work, it is equitable, right? So that's where if you came into in a project and you did an hour of work and you got paid an hour's of work pay. So let's say you got paid $100 an hour and you got paid $100, and you saw another person, they had that situation, they worked for 1 hour and everyone else worked for 1,000 hours or something and they got paid. You believe that that one individual thinks that their 1 hours, they're a regular dev and all that stuff. They in their heart believe that 1 hour's work is worth 1 hour's pay. You believe it was equitable, right? And if they got paid, that 1 hour pay, right? You can add in all types of other weird things. The person thinks that, oh, I'm looking at you and you received 1,000 hours worth of pay, but you can still believe that it's equitable if you're saying, you don't believe that you're just negotiating, basically, right? You really only deserve 1 hour. You only deserve 1 hour, so it's still equitable, right? So that's where some of the confusion can come in when people think of equitable. For whatever reason, people think that they can't have an opinion on what another person thinks. Where if you reason about it a little bit, yes, you can have an opinion on what another person thinks. So that's what that's about. Manipulability is it's a characteristic of a fairness system. If you can do something to where you can receive a higher payout based off of something like knowing another person's preferences, then that system can be manipulated. So one example within the fairness or fair division literature is cake cutting. They use this a lot. So if one member cuts and then another person chooses the piece, that's a cake cutting exercise. You can imagine a piece of cake, one person cuts, the other person. You can do this with kids. One person cuts, the other person chooses, right? So if one member knows that another person loves cherries, then they can cut the cake so that, oh, it's the part of the cake that has the cherries is this little piece, and then they get that little piece, and then or they have a higher chance of getting that little piece. So they're manipulating the distribution instead of just cutting the cake in half if there's just two people. So that would be a way of manipulating. Right? Yeah, but that's the it's really about, if you know another person's preferences, manipulating the system, right? And then efficiency is what all in the United States, we love efficiency. We end up not caring about any of the other ones because we think efficiency is everything. If there's something left on the table, we hate it. It's inefficient. It makes us sad. We look down at equitable stuff. Well, really, definitely egalitarian stuff. But and we kind of don't understand equitable situations. We think it's too complicated. It's like all this fussing. Just if you work hard, then you'll get what you deserve. It's kind of what we think here, right? And then that's
Sounds
caused
like extreme on the efficiency.
It's
Take
a-
too much time, so it must not be efficient. So I'm not even going to look at it. To
well, it could be,
understand
could be. There's just, yeah, it's inefficient as in we never really got any work done. So yeah, that kind of thing.
We discussed how to be equitable too long.
Yep. Yeah. And so
Split it up equally. That's good enough.
mhm. So situations will happen where there can be the law. No one reasoned about fairness at all, and there's just the law. And then people worked, and at the end, they said, "Oh well, I get, one for me, two for you, or one for me, one for you, two for me, one for you, three for me." They're distributing everything like, "Hey, what the hell's happening here?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, well that's the law." It's any type of distribution at the end, whatever can be had, that's what they, people that are big on efficiency, as long as nothing's left on the table, they think that that's fair. And you can come up with all types of examples where it's not fair and they believe it's not fair and all this weirdness. But that's kind of where our ideology is here. And so that's a lot of this stuff flies in the face of that. We were trying to argue with that and bring those things up. All right, so any questions about fairness so far? All right. So here's the meat and potatoes of this. We've got distribution and we've got voting. The whole concept here, how you would do an organic project is based off of hours. So you have to record your hours if you want to say that a project is going, if you want to manage the ownership percentage and the outputs for a project. And you also, and the first thing that jumps out is, okay, everybody's hours aren't worth the same, right? So you're gonna have some type of modifiers for those hours. So at a high level, basically, and don't worry, you don't have to worry about specifics. We've got like an Excel spreadsheet and share for this stuff. But basically, or if you want to talk about the specifics, that's fine too. But basically, you have hours, you have to track your hours, you have to have a distribution, a modifier for those hours. So for example, everyone's based off of, let's just say, a senior dev, right? So you have this one where their hours, 1 hour of a senior dev, and the modifier is 1. So they're always 1 hour of senior dev is always 1. And you can reason about this based off of what people are normally getting paid if you want to. Okay, and you can say a junior dev is 0.5 of the senior dev. You can say a principal, which is somebody who can bring in work, is 1.5 or 1.25. You can say a junior marketing person, in relation to senior dev, you can say whatever they get paid. It could be 0.25 or 0.5 or whatever. The main thing is you got to have, with a system like this, you have to have same defaults, right? So you can just go out and put some same defaults together, and then you can make it to where people can start a project quickly and have all the modifiers there. So that's the part with as far as distribution, and that's what's going to, if somebody works 100 hours on a project and another person works 5 hours, right? The person that works 100 hours, well, let's just say one person works 95 hours, another person works 5 hours. The person that worked 95 hours, if they were both senior devs, right? So they're both a modifier of one person owns 95%, they have 95% of the voting points, which is in the next section of that project. And the person that worked 5 hours is 5, right? So this system, there's a couple things that come through on this. The system doesn't reward the idea person. If a person has an idea that, hey, I know what, let's make the next Facebook. And it's like, all right, I'll work on some software that will be something similar for a very niche group or something like that, and I'll sell it and do marketing or use it how I want to for that. But you don't own 95. If you worked 5 hours on that idea, on their project management or whatever, you don't own 95% of the project, right? If someone worked 95 hours, right, and you worked 5 hours, even though it's your idea from the beginning in this setup, you don't get a disproportionately high reward for that, right? So this system is set up so that people that work, it's based off of hourly. Now you could set it up to where you have a Jack Welch, and you could say his modifier is 10 or 50 or something like that. And he says, yeah, I have an idea for airplane engine software, and I'm just not going to tell you about it, but I can guarantee, unless you can give me a modifier of 100 or something like that. You want to work with me, and we'll do it like that. So every hour, it's like 100 of your hours. And guess what? I wave my magic wand, and people just start purchasing this stuff right after you build it, because I have all the connections. You could set it up to do that. It's just, that's not real life. If you know someone like that, you're already very successful, probably, because it's just a good situation to be in. But you can handle it. It's just a fantasy. So this system handles real life, which usually is this distribution with the modifiers that we're talking about here. So that's reasoning about this whole system. You can spend a good time just on that portion, thinking about that and going back and forth on the edge cases and talking about that stuff. But that's the long and the short of it. And then you've got voting. The voting system that I recommend here is a cumulative voting. So you have to have some way of rewarding or deciding what the priorities are, where your budget's going to be spent, if you're making revenue, if you're not making revenue, just what you're going to allow for hours. It could be that if you have an idea, you're not a programmer, you're a project manager, and you say, well, I have this list of priorities for features that I think are important, and I'm going to do a lot of talking with customers, and that's going to be hours. I'm out there doing the development of the product, product management and all these other things. And I have a set of things that, like I said, that are important to me. You're going to go develop on, here's the list, and I have a greater amount of points that I can contribute to saying this is a priority list. Now, if somebody looks at it and says, I don't want to work on that stuff, then that's fine. If you can use the system to say, these are the hours for this priority list from the beginning that I approve. So you can say, for this list, for development, I'm only going to allow 10 hours a week or something like that. But right now we're in an analysis phase, so we need 100 hours a week for that. You can do all that stuff from the beginning. You also, for voting, you also vote new people into your group. So everyone just isn't in your group. You got to allow them in your group. So that solves some of those issues. But
You
voting
have
is very
a
important.
portion,
Mhm.
yeah, up at the top. It sounded like you're kind of talking about it.
Mhm.
Ownership percentage. So it's talking about hour manipulation. So
Yeah.
you have something where if someone came in and put, 150 hours or whatever. So this, I don't want to put it in fantasy, but more real. So you have, I guess that's kind of what you're saying, like where you designate like 10 hours or something.
Mhm.
So you could have 5 people working together and end up where maybe as a group you think too much work is going into one area. So someone put a ton of time and no one else in the group finds value in it.
Yeah.
So you don't want that percentage to be that great. Maybe it's a feature that everyone else says that's useless for the product. We didn't want to go that way, but you just spent 100 hours this week going on it.
Right. You got 2 things to help you with that. One of them is on the other system, Coopensation system, we have approved hours. It's the same kind of concept, or firm hours. You say 10 hours for this feature. That's it. Also, you've got voting of the hours at the weekly, just like a timesheet, contractor timesheet. So you could say, oh, you went crazy, even if it was unapproved. One person said, yeah, I worked 100 hours on making the little birdie fly across the screen. And the 5 other people said, nope, we don't approve your hours for that week. Right? Same situation that normal contractor sign off of hours that everybody does, every day or every week. And they say, we don't approve you. But per individual, their risk is limited to that week. And they're like, oh, you guys are a bunch of bozos. It took 100 hours to make the birdie fly across the screen. Well, okay, fine. I'm not working with you guys anymore. And by the way, that code legally is not yours since you didn't sign off on it. So it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. All that stuff. So you limit their risk and you also limit the risk of the people who, vote on the hours and all that stuff. So that's business as usual. Right? You just handle it the same way as you do regular hours. So last thing is edge cases. One edge case is sales. Somebody goes out, does 20% on sales, or what I'm recommending is 20% on sales commission, but you can change that. You can't ever take that away from the sales. So that's the one concept of the play market. Basically, somebody brings in a resource, they say, hey, I've got this connection, whatever, and they do that. You can't say, okay, now we're going to use your money for something else, features, whatever. They've got to be able to, they have control of that. So that's an important concept. We can talk about some more. But there's also a concept of maintenance. So if there's revenue coming in for a software project, you can say from the beginning, security has to be handled, servers have to be paid for, and yes, your 20% is also for your customers some of that is gonna go towards this. So you can do that part. If there's regular maintenance, everybody's got to contribute it as far as the revenue and all that stuff. You don't get to stop that. But what you can stop is other types of features where somebody says, we're going to take your resource, your money, and apply it to this new feature that we think you need. You can't do that. Or I'm recommending that you shouldn't be able to do that. Within the system.
What is the problem with taking their money and then if you have other people in the group that think the feature's great, all the customers are going to want it, and the salesperson that brought in a new customer says, no, I don't like that feature, my customer doesn't want it.
Yeah, that's the thing, is his customer that he's the expert on.
Yeah.
Is the one he's saying, yeah, you guys want to do that work across the board for whatever customers and all that stuff. But this customer is the one that I brought in.
Yeah.
So it's just based off of that. It's not maintenance, it's a feature. And so, like I was saying, it would be you're reallocating their money that they, worked hard for and all that stuff. Is the same thing as reallocating a resource. In the hearing aid example, you created machinery to make the hearing aid, right? And then the umbrella comes in and says, yeah, we like that machinery and we'll make a 50% return on investment over here on that. And sorry, bye, we're going to take that, right? So you have now that person has a disincentive to make machinery. The salesperson has a disincentive to do sales. Like, oh, you're taking away my money? No, for this other thing. So that's where I'm placing that. It basically makes that play market thing. So weighing the concept of, it's called, the proper name is selective intervention. The concept of selective intervention, someone coming in and taking the resource that I made and reallocating.
So if they come in with a new customer and they have, money allocated out of their own budget, and they want a different feature. So let's say there's two features that could be chosen, and one everyone else wants, but other than the salesperson wants, if it doesn't agree with that one because it doesn't fit this customer. They have a feature that they want that the rest of the group thinks we don't really care about that one. It's fine, but it's not a big deal for all the other customers. At that point, is it something, what can you do? Can you just say we won't use your money at all? We're not going to do a feature and we're not going to take your money?
You said the sales guy has the idea for the feature?
Yeah, so the sales guy has an idea for a feature that the rest of the group doesn't care about. And then the rest of the group has a feature idea that they want to work on. So they're not going to touch the sales guy's money in this situation. What happens about the feature the sales guy wants? I guess they still have the right to just say, no, we're not going to develop it.
The sales guy gets the vote on the feature sale.
He could vote, and then if everyone else says, no, we don't care, then
that's a point of cumulative voting.
Because they're going to have 20% or whatever vote. They'll have some amount of vote, but it's not going to be enough if no one else wanted to do it.
For that customer, all they have is, for that customer, 20% of that money contribute as ownership percentage.
Right.
So they can vote as far as features for whatever based off of that power, right? Which is actually very small.
Right.
So they can vote, and other people say, go away. We're not building that or whatever, they want to. But it's just his, he just can't have his money, his or her money taken away.
Okay. So it's kind of balanced with the idea that they could request something, but they don't have enough power to overrule on voting by themselves. And you also don't have the power to extract their money that they made to do something else. Okay.
Yeah. Forking is controversial. There's lots of edge cases within forking. You've got one side where a way to exploit, a way to manipulate is to wait for some project to get done. Well, first off, you can say there's no forking at all. Now, then you've got the situation of the patent troll. Right? Somebody comes through, you work on something, and they say, okay, you can't go off and use it on your own, period. They could have a great idea or a silly idea, like I was saying earlier before we started, the Microsoft slider. They patented something that's just completely ridiculous, but they have this power, right, as a patent troll, and then you can't do anything about it. Forking is made to stop that kind of silliness. Right? The person that starts and then tries to sit on things, and you have a sunk cost, and so you you have to contribute, or just you let them have of your all of your equity and everything like that. But they didn't contribute that much at all. All they had was ideas. So there's numerous examples of that in all across within software. So forking is what stops that kind of silliness. But on the other side, you've got the problem of forking lately or late in the project, where someone can say, oh, we're 95% done. Now I'm going to fork it, and I'm going to go off and sell this finished product, right? And receive all of the money, right? So you've got those two extremes that you got to stop. And so what this says is that when you do a fork, the distribution stays, the ownership distribution stays based off of the ownership percentage towards the fork relative to the code, right? The percentage that is of the original code base. So for instance, if you have a distribution, if the code is if you do a fork, you click the fork button, and the code is 100% the same, the distribution of the revenue that comes in is exactly the same as before. If the code was changed 5% and it's 95% the same, 95% of the code distribution, the revenue that comes through goes towards whoever it is, right? And that distribution, remember, it could be 90% of the designer's work,
Mm-hmm.
or project manager's work, or whatever. It stays the same. You can't just go. So you'd have to rewrite everything in order to do a change there.
So then on this one, if you said the 100% remains the same, so you fork something and maybe a salesperson takes it, and then all that happens at this point is selling to customers. So then you just have the 20% or whatever sells. That would apply to the new code base. That makes sense.
Yeah. So they could never, they're in a bad situation. Well, it's a weird situation. They could never get rid of the ownership distribution, or somebody that really would try to manipulate the system would do a fork and try to somehow lightly rewrite all the code. And there's already forensics there and a history of that to combat that. Like, oh, you didn't really rewrite the stuff. You just made these small changes or whatever. So if you want to try to manipulate, there's precedent there to stop you from doing that.
So what about I don't know exactly what would be going on with like license and stuff for this sort of thing on forking. But if I looked at something like a GPL software, I don't even know if this would work with GPL, but let's say someone forks and then they don't. So one way that people make money with GPL software is selling support services around it. So they're not selling the product.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering, like, where does it tie in for that? Like, how does revenue tie in?
What I was thinking was GPL is when they do it's just straight up open source rules. So they can do the services and do all that, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Okay.
The dual licensing is of the GPL is where this would all come into play. So basically you don't have dual license. You can't do the enterprise edition fork. You have to obey these rules with the enterprise edition fork. If someone goes in there and says, oh, I'm doing a services contract, well, they're off doing a thing. I mean, they could do that with, like I said, media wiki, right? There's nothing to stop that. If you wanted, and that's what I would recommend is GPL dual license, and this applies to the dual license enterprise version. And then all the forking would work there.
Okay.
But you can use it you have to have some type of forking license. If you don't use GPL, you're gonna have to make some type of ability to do a license with forking and write it from scratch. But I would just use GPL.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Well, with respect to the hourly modifier, it sounds like typically it's role-based. At the risk of making this entirely too complex, what about the idea of actually putting modifiers on the tasks? And so, like, for example, one thing that would, follow on from that is, like with the voting stuff, let's say you have a really good idea person, but maybe they only take 5% of the hours, and maybe they're fine with that or whatever. But if the other people, they don't see the vision or whatever, and they vote him down every time, and that would disincentivize him from coming up with the ideas. So does it make any sense to have a modifier on the actual, like let's say coming up with the idea has some other multiplier that makes that more valuable?
Probably. I didn't really think about tasks directly. The big problem with this whole setup is what they call monitoring costs. So it's expensive to log your hours. People don't want to do that.
Yeah.
All these things. So if the task side would work, if it sounds like it'd be more expensive, but if it was, that's my only concern with doing the tasks. So if you did tasks and you would say, all right, let's just say we're going to implement some type of algorithm that it's hard to implement, right? And if we were to say, and you say a couple of hours on the task, or you're just saying kind of a bounty situation where if you complete the task, that's some type of ownership percentage. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that actually. Now thinking about it, it would almost be like you'd have it might make sense to say you have some constant bounty plus multiplier times hours. That would probably simplify things.
Yeah.
Yeah, just something, like, or something that, maybe the role isn't a big determinant on, how efficient you are. Like maybe writing test cases or docs or something, anybody can do it, and it's, arguably not much more efficient for somebody to do it than somebody else. Maybe some way to balance that out to where you're not paying a senior dev twice as much just because he's a senior dev for doing something that doesn't take that much less time for him.
Yeah. If you were to set up the system from the beginning where you said, okay, it's all bounties, you're going to have to do percentage wise. So let's say I'm going to make a LinkedIn clone, and the person that implements the Bloom filters properly, they get 50% of the entity or something like that. Yeah, you could do something like that, and then it's not based off hours, and it's a big fat bounty, and then you're good to go. Okay, fine.
It's interesting though, because what Ian was saying, you could have a senior dev or the principal dev, hopefully they don't do it, but they come in and they choose a task that's just super easy for them. They can do it all day without any effort.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're getting a 1.5 multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the reason why you would want them involved is to do a task like bringing in new customers or doing some work that's maybe the junior developer couldn't do.
Yeah.
Or the junior developer is working on a task that takes, 6 or 8 times as long as a result.
Yeah, so let's manipulate it like that. If you're working on, you're rewriting GitLab, and then the principal comes in and says, I'm just going to work on tests, and I spent 100 hours this week or whatever. That's people manipulating it that way. It ends up being like one of the things is they're also increasing their ownership percentage and voting and all that stuff. So when you come in and you see this person that is doing that type of manipulation, it's fork, go off, and do your own thing. That's what I would say is the way to combat that. Like somebody that's being crazy that way, that's what I would say. I mean, that's what you do with an open source project.
So I have a question based on what you just were suggesting.
Mhm.
Earlier you were talking about voting in new people. So
Mhm.
I want this person to come work with us.
Yep.
They can help us on that filter or whatever.
Yeah.
What about voting them out of the group?
I don't think that you can do that. Like
You
as
could
they're
allow
part
them
of
to
it.
have ownership. So what I was thinking was this weekly thing on voting on hours. You just go. They've done it for, essentially it's on you to decide on are their hours worthwhile or their task or whatever week to week. The
Yeah.
group. Well, you could do the same thing where you go. You
Yeah, no
continue
more
to have
hours for
this
you.
ownership, but we don't want you to work at all
Yeah,
anymore.
that part, yeah.
Yeah.
But the part where you're saying voting out would mean you can no longer afford. That's where it would be controversial.
Oh, okay. But yeah, okay. So yeah, I can see that they always have the capability to fork. I guess I'm always thinking this is like somehow open.
It's the dual. Think of, like, let's use GitLab as an example, right? Somebody has the rights for those enterprise license, right?
Yeah.
On that side, that's the part that us as regular humans, we don't get to play.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what you're playing with, is that portion.
Can you sell it under another license without changing any code? So I think that's covered. That's for anyone though. Even if you had someone come in and do no code changes, and they fork it, and then if they sell it, then they get. If they sell it, they just get commission. They don't own anything other than commission on sales. If they actually want more than that, then they need to do code changes. And it wouldn't matter if they were there beforehand and then fork, or if they're just someone random that comes and sees a public repository.
And then we let them. Again, you're letting this person come in. It's like, oh, this person is drooling from the mouth. They look real hungry. Let's load them in. Oh, they forked it, and they started selling it. Okay, well, we get the original distribution. Oh, but they're rewriting part, but it's a fantasy world, really. But I mean, it can happen. But you just have to really fall asleep at the wheel. And you kind of, at some point, you get what you deserve.
So you're saying that you're not, with what you're looking at here, you're not allowed to fork unless you're voted in?
Yeah.
So that to me doesn't sound like an open source thing.
Yeah, well, like they said, GitLab. Can you fork the enterprise edition and is it open source? Number one, yeah, you think it's open source. Number two, can you fork the enterprise? It's the dual license. No, you cannot.
No, you can do the community edition.
Mm-hmm. And you would be able to do it with this way that I'm saying, GPL. Yeah. You could do one where it's not. So this thing is really set up for those projects that they're not great ideas for an open source project. So GitLab is a great idea. This is something where it's, okay, we're going to do something like an insurance project or something that is not sexy at all. Maybe it could be open, maybe not. Maybe like Travis CI was not very sexy. Maybe it can be open, maybe not, that kind of thing. But how are you going to get these people to come together to work on it? Okay, you need to have some type of system to allow for it, right? So that's really it. That's the meat and potatoes of this thing, and we are at 2 hours. So.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
All right. We did it.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm gonna stop the broadcast.